everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Cuyahoga River South Watershed Advisory Committee meeting. This is our October meeting, and it should be about an hour and a half. My name is Donna Friedman, and I'll be helping to host this meeting today. I'm a watershed team leader for the sewer district. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So any questions that you have, you can put those in the chat, and that will be monitored by Keith McClintock, manager of watershed programs. We will also be posting the presentation on the district's website, but if you need any specific slides or if you have any questions, feel free to ask your team leader. Thank you to Joyce Guardado for helping send out those information sheets. Hopefully you got your information sheet with your community cost share information on it. If you did not, please let us know. So this is our agenda today, what we'll be covering. And like I said, we should hopefully get you out of here on time. And with that, I will hand it over to Matt Sharver, Deputy Director of Watershed Programs.
Good afternoon, everyone. Frank Greenland unfortunately had a conflict this afternoon, so he was not able to join us. But on behalf of Frank and all of us here in Watershed Programs at the district, we want to thank you for attending the Cuyahoga South Watershed Advisory Committee meeting update. I just want to highlight a couple items before we move on through the agenda. First being Justin Tellep, who is one of our environmental compliance inspectors in our water quality industrial surveillance work group, is going to provide a feature presentation on a fish translocation project in Plum Creek. I think you're going to find it quite fascinating. There's a lot of good information that kind of tells the story of how we collectively as organizations are improving the water quality of all of these streams in the Lake Erie watershed in Northeast Ohio. So that's going to be really interesting to hear from Justin today. And then secondly, George Remius, who is our manager of stormwater strategic support, is going to walk us through some work that he's been doing in partnership with the folks here at the district and many of the municipalities, looking closer at the relationship between the local system improvements and the regional system. So that will be good information as well. Third update we wanted to provide you was related to your accessibility to information on the district's programs, specifically under the Regional Stormwater Management Program, as it relates to community cost share. We've just started an effort to create a dashboard that will be a tool that hopefully member communities can use to access current up-to-date community cost share information, as well as other information about our grant programs, and perhaps even conduct some of our business transactions through that dashboard. So more to come on that as we develop that over the winter here, and hopefully we may have something in place by our March. And then lastly, just wanted to provide a general update on our member community infrastructure program. We did recently award in September $15 million worth of sewer rehabilitation replacement infrastructure dollars to our member communities. And just to keep in mind to you all that based on the new rate structure for our wastewater fees, we're anticipating that we'll have $15 million available annually going forward for the next period of years. So we look forward to continuing to fund our member communities and our partners on those projects. So with that, I will turn it back over to Donna, and thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. All right, so on this slide is your community cost share update. Community cost share is 25% of the stormwater fee that's collected from your community goes back into a hopper for your use on local stormwater issues. So almost 31 million has been sent since the initiation of the stormwater program, and there's still currently there's about 22 million in the hopper to be spent. So if you're having trouble finding ways to use your funds, you can call your watershed team leader. We have a story map, and we can help run through some projects that are applicable for this fund. Some popular uses are catch basin repair, leaf pickup, and winter salt storage. Those are all fall appropriate. So with that, we can move on to the next slide. Thanks, Mike. All right, local sewer system evaluation studies. This is on the wastewater side of things. So these studies are being completed to help you identify issues within your sanitary sewer systems that are not owned by the sewer district, but that are tributary to the district's wastewater treatment plants. So currently for the Southwest Interceptors area and the CVI area, we are working towards community meetings. Some of you may have already had your community meetings with us, but we will be sending out those community reports, and those reports are all viewable on GIS as well. So there's a lot of information there, a lot to sort through, but these reports can be and should be used to support your member community infrastructure program grants. If you have any questions about those, again, feel free to reach out to your watershed team leader, and we can help you find and access any of that information that you may need. Next topic that we have, we are looking to update our stormwater fee credit policy manual. The updates that I'm going to give now are not for the residential credits, but more so for the commercial, industrial, and HOA property credits. So there's a handful of them. So this first one on this slide, this is previously the quantity credit applied only to lots that drained to a stormwater control measure. So if we look at this map here, you can see the stormwater control measure is shown in blue. And some of the properties in this very, very large HOA did not technically drain to that stormwater control measure. And so in our old policy manual, the rule is if it doesn't drain to it, then they can't get credit, which you could see would be problematic in some cases because these residents are still paying to help operate and maintain that stormwater control measure. So that will, what we're looking to do is update that so that as long as the stormwater control measure is large enough and was built to provide retention for the entire area, regardless of whether an area drains to it or not, then we will be able to give those residents within that like non-drainage area credit. And so that's the change we're looking to make for this first bullet point. This second update here, so we currently have industrial Npdes quality credit that allows companies to get 25% for complying with their permit requirements. That's that 25% credit on their fee for stormwater. And we're going to be copying that program over to the MS4 Npdes permit holders, which would be municipalities. And it would be specifically for municipality owned properties that are billed. So most municipally owned properties aren't billed. They're, city hall or service yards because they don't bring in funds. They're like nonprofit. They aren't billed, but there are some situations, very few situations, where municipal properties are billed. So for those properties, because you have your MS4 program, we're going to be looking to have a 25% credit. This is going to be a quality credit, and you will have to apply and renew annually. So if you need more information on that, if you think that you might have properties in your municipality that would qualify, then you can reach out to Chris Hartman at our office and he can help walk through that process with you. A couple more points here. So this point number 3, credit eligibility will require an applicant to have at least partial or shared maintenance responsibilities for a stormwater credit, or sorry, for an SEM. So we are changing this from sole responsibility. So it used to say that you had to have sole maintenance, operation responsibility for that SEM, and we're changing it to partial or shared. So you still have to have some buy-in, but the owner or whoever won't have to be the only one. So number 4, this adjustment is to help streamline our credit program with our green infrastructure grant program to just cut down on paperwork and make it easy for those green infrastructure grant program members to get a credit. And then finally, number 5 here, we're going to be moving the credit renewal dates so that it allows for inspections to be completed during better weather so that folks aren't out there in the snow trying to complete their inspections. Moving on to the report a flood tool. We pitched this at the last WAC meeting, if you recall. This is an easy fillable form that allows for data collection related to overland flooding or property flooding. This is something that service directors, engineers, office workers can all fill out. We have various forms of this, online forms, paper forms, Excel forms, you name it, we have it. And we have this so that we're trying to collect data in a uniform manner across the service area. Uniform data helps everyone. And so once this data is in there and you're able to look at all the areas of your community that flood, we can make that exportable for you. And then you can use that data to troubleshoot areas. You can use it for your MCIP applications or for other funding applications. And so we're really hoping that you guys will start using this. We do have about 300 or 400 inputs into this right now. And so if you want to start using this and you need training or you just need access, please reach out to us so that we can get that for you. We are rebranding. So this is a little bit of a process, but we are rebranding. We have new logos, new colors, and new fonts that will be on all of our materials. And our new logo will be on the next slide. Here we go. So on dark backgrounds, this is what we'll be using. It is going to be white logo on dark backgrounds. And then on lighter backgrounds, this is going to be our new logo moving forward. So if you need any help with adapting your publications with our new logo, we can help you do that. So feel free to reach out to us. And then lastly, this is your Watershed Team Leader map with the new logo colors and branding. Hopefully you know who your Watershed Team Leader is by now, but you know, if not, you can reach out to us. And with that, I'll take any questions. Keith, is there anything in the chat?
Not that I can see right now.
Okay, great. So with that, I'll hand it over to Justin Tulloch to give that presentation that Matt was talking about. Justin is an environmental compliance inspector too. Take it away, Justin.
All right, thank you, Donna. You can just go to the next slide. So I'm here to give you an overview of a project that we're doing on Plum Creek, because that's actually a tributary to the Rocky River, but it's kind of like a pilot project that we're doing. We're looking to translocate fish back in the upper reaches of Plum Creek due to this physical barrier here. Just to give you some background on Plum Creek, it is a headwater stream tributary to the west branch of the Rocky River. Really kind of starts in Brunswick, flows its way through Columbia and ends at Olmsted Falls right there at one of the public parks. So the sewer district maintains 3.6 miles of Plum Creek within the service area. Some of the watershed characteristics is it drains 18 square miles, which for a headwater stream is pretty big. That cutoff is really at 20 square miles. 27% of the watershed's forested, 20% urban, and really only 4% impervious, which is really good for that watershed. Just to give you guys some background on how Ohio EPA assesses their water quality standards is basically a completely biological approach. So when I mean biological, I'm talking about the fish and the bugs that live in the stream. So the fish have their own metric. It's called the IBI, or the Index of Biotic Integrity. And the macroinvertebrates, or the aquatic bugs, have their own metric as well, called the ICI, or Invertebrate Community Index. We also measure physical habitat to see if the habitat's suitable enough for the macroinvertebrates and bugs and fish to live in there, as well as taking chemical parameters, like is there any chemical pollutants that are affecting our biological indicators in the stream. This table over here to the right shows every assessment that's been completed on Plum Creek at various locations dating back to 1981. And what I have highlighted there in red shows non-attainment for every assessment that's ever been done on Plum Creek. We're starting to see a little bit of improvement, but the fish community is really the one that's limiting the status there. So back in 1981 and prior to the 90s, listing or causes of impairment were really due to gross organic enrichment, poor chemical water quality. Gross organic enrichment is really like sewage getting into the stream, causing poor chemical water quality. And then moving into the 2000s, it was mostly nutrient enrichment that was the cause. Nutrient enrichment can lower dissolved oxygen concentrations and really can't support a good biological assemblage. The most recent surveys, 2014 to recent, have really shown no bad signs of water quality, and the causes of impairment are due to natural sources. So the water quality improvements that have been done on Plum Creek are pretty drastic. The organic enrichment problem was really dealt with kind of starting in 1983. That's when the sewer district and the US EPA really started their regional planning efforts to expand our southerly wastewater treatment plant out westward. So when our southwest interceptor, which is a really big trunk sewer, it collects all your local sanitary sewers in your service area, goes into one big trunk sewer and goes southerly in Cuyahoga Heights. When that reached out and went online in 1997, that redirected flows from the Brentwood, Western Ohio Utility, and ODOT Park 339 wastewater treatment plants, eliminating over 500,000 gallons a day of treated wastewater to Plum Creek, which is pretty significant based on Plum Creek being really a smaller stream. There's currently only one wastewater plant remaining on Plum Creek called the Plum Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant. It's a real small plant, average design flow of 0.04 million gallons a day. If you compare that to our southerly plant, we average over 100 million gallons a day, so that's really small. So that took care of organic enrichment. Moving forward, the nutrient enrichment was really taken care of with the lead from the Ohio EPA. They created a nutrient-based total maximum daily load in 2001 for the creek based on the results of their 1997 assessment, I think it was. What they did when they did that total maximum daily load is they put restrictions and made that one wastewater treatment plant start reporting their nutrient levels. And when they reported high, they were able to limit them to reduce the nutrient loading to Plum Creek. And actually, our 2019 and 2020 monitoring by our group in the environmental assessment section has demonstrated that Plum Creek is now meeting all the nutrient total maximum daily load target criteria. So both nutrient enrichment and organic enrichment were taken care of prior to 2019. Just to give you some overview of the whole watershed, because I think this is important to touch on. These three figures show three different time frames on the Rocky River and what the attainment status is based on the biological communities. The red lines are impaired, so not meeting water quality standards. Yellow would be partial, so either the bugs or the fish are meeting, but not both. And then the blue would be in full attainment. So you look at 1981 to 82 on the left side here, you see the entire main stem basically in non-attainment. Most of the West Branch, Plum Creek is the small tributary on the left side of the screen, and a bunch of the tributaries in Rocky Main Stem in the sewer district service area is all red or yellow, so not meeting the standards. The middle figure here shows 1997, which is really the year that Southwest Interceptor came online and redirected wastewater flows. You really don't see too much improvement. We see 51.7% in attainment to 59% in attainment. Where you really see a big jump in the water quality standards attainment here is in 2014 and 2015. The entire Rocky River main stem recovered back into full attainment, as well as the east and west branch. Really the only streams that are not in attainment are streams that had wastewater treatment plants and they have some kind of physical barrier that it's preventing the fish from migrating back upstream. These black stars here actually demonstrate all 9 of the wastewater treatment plants that Southwest Interceptor took in. So that's a lot of wastewater loading that got redirected out of the watershed and really improved the water quality there. So now let's dig into the biological communities here. We'll start with the macroinvertebrates or aquatic bugs. These are little pictures here, what they look like. You have a small mayfly, a caddisfly, and another mayfly. They're real small bugs, usually less than 1 inch long, but they're really good bioindicators of water quality. The top left figure here shows the total taxa per year. And really after 1997, we're seeing increase in total taxa, so increased biodiversity in the stream, which is a good sign. The bottom left figure here shows our sensitive taxa. So when your water pollution goes down and improves, you should see more sensitive taxa, which we're seeing especially after 2000. And the figure on the right shows the qualitative EPT taxa. So what I mean by that is those are the EPT taxa, they're groups of bugs that are really sensitive pollution. Not everyone in those families are sensitive, but most of them are, and that's what EPA uses as a good judge of water quality. So we're seeing a lot more of them in abundance of each taxa per year, especially after that time when them wastewater plants went offline. And actually 5 of the last 6 assessments dating back to 2014 were in attainment for this metric. So we're halfway there. The fish aren't meeting, but the macroinvertebrates are. So these bugs, when they hatch an adult life form, they can fly above the fish barrier, which is the Plum Creek Falls, which I'll show you in a minute. They can fly up there, recolonate, and then start a new population. They're not limited by any barriers. So now looking at the other half, the fish community. The top left figure here shows the IBI, which is the fish community scores, which have been poor to very poor, almost in every assessment dating back to 1981. So when you have a poor fish community, it can be due to multiple things. One, you could have bad water chemistry, which we went over earlier, that's been cleaned up and the fish community is so bad. The bottom left one shows the habitat. So the increased habitat and better spawning grounds, places for these little fish to hide, the better the fish community is going to be. They're not going to live in a small culverted stream. So we take what's called the QHEI, is a qualitative habitat evaluation index based on the fish. And we're demonstrating good to excellent habitat really throughout Plum Creek's entire reach, and almost in every assessment year. So the third reason the fish community could be impaired is because there's a fish barrier. When the wastewater plants were online, they basically wiped the fish population out of Plum Creek, and they can't get back in there based on a series of waterfalls down by the west branch of the Rocky River. And this figure here to the right shows just that. The blue dots would be streams similar size in the west branch of the Rocky River that do not have a fish barrier, and the red have a fish barrier, and 5 of the 6 sites within that area are impaired because of the fish barriers. So this is what we're dealing with down there. This is right at the confluence with the west branch of the Rocky River. This is the start of a very high gradient cascade of waterfalls. A lot of people use these as slip and slides down there. But this waterfall here acts as a natural barrier to get fish back upstream for fish migration. So since there's no causes of impairment for the stream besides these barriers, the Ohio EPA has said that it's potentially eligible for an aquatic life use redesignation to a lower water quality goal. There's nothing more that we can do to clean the water up to make it meet its goal. If it does get lowered, which the Ohio EPA will review in 2029, I believe, you're lowering the water quality protection on the stream. You're lowering the dissolved oxygen standards, the habitat goals, and the ammonia concentrations that are going to be allowed in the stream.
Hey, Justin, back on that slide. Sorry, Mike. Other streams in the service area are out of attainment. So why did the EPA propose this for Plum Creek and not for other streams?
Yeah, good question. I think this is one of the first streams that I've read in an Ohio EPA report that's recommended this. Plum Creek's come a long way. There's no more gross organic enrichment. The water quality, the chemistry is good in the stream. It should be able to support those fish. The macroinvertebrate biology has come back, which I think is the most important factor. And the Ohio EPA has basically said there's no other causes that we can try to resolve to bring it back into attainment. This is a pretty obvious fish barrier down here that fish cannot get above. And this is really the pilot project that they want to try this on. Other streams in the service area have other problems. Really urban streams don't really support a good biological community. This is only got 4% pervious surface. So this is like almost the ideal candidate to try this project on.
Thanks, Justin.
Mm-hmm. We can go to the next slide. So when Ohio EPA proposed lowering the water quality standards, they also proposed an alternative. They proposed a seeding of Upper Plum Creek with a representative collection of headwater fish species from adjacent waters within the basin should be considered. If we're able to restore the fish community, it'll contribute to the aquatic life use restoration and eliminate the need to lower the water quality goal. So when we were reading that, we kind of said, how can we identify this with what the line of work that we did? So looking at our water quality and resource management focus area and our strategic plan, this is a perfect project that identifies an opportunity to drive water quality protection and enhancement for Plum Creek, and if we expand it for other creeks in the area. We've already solved numerous of the water quality issues by taking those wastewater plants offline. We're wrapping up our Southwest Interceptor local sewer system evaluation study, which should improve water quality again. It's really just the free fish migration that's hindering its potential to achieve full biological attainment. So we have an idea now. We have to come up with a plan, and that starts with the species selection. This is not just a random list. We went through a full literature review, selected 9 candidate species, and they're based on the following criteria. First, they've never been collected in Plum Creek before. Second, they're found in abundance in adjacent waters. So these are fish that would likely have migrated right back up into the stream when the water quality improved. As we saw in the figure earlier, when the Rocky River really recovered, those fish migrated throughout, which is natural. Third, they have the ability to increase the IBI score, which this figure to the right really demonstrates. The IBI score is that fish metric again, it's half of what they use for water quality standards. And all the plus signs you see here to each of the 12 metrics of the IBI score show that each one of these fish really will improve the IBI score and hopefully get it back into attainment. Their spawning and habitat preferences were available in Plum Creek. We cross-referenced the literature on what these fish need for spawning compared to the habitat evaluation index. So the habitat should be there. They should be happy and spawn abundantly. And they're typical species found in other West Branch headwater streams. We wanted to start with these. These are common fish that should be in there, and these are what we're going with. So now that we got our species, now we got to come up with a plan to get them there. So all of our source locations where we're going to collect these fish from are going to be from within the Rocky River watershed. And we're looking to do a goal of 200 fish per species per year into Plum Creek at the 2 seed locations shown here to the right. And we're going to do this for 3 years. So the benefit of doing it for 3 years is you reduce the environmental variability of a bad spawning year. Say you have a really hot spring and the conditions aren't right, those fish, not all of them are going to spawn. We're increasing genetic diversity, so less deformities, lesions, tumors, diseases within these fish would happen with inbreeding. We're increasing the number of fish introduced, and therefore we're increasing the chance of success that they're going to inhabit and recolonize this section of stream. All translocation is going to be done in the spring before these fish spawn. So when we concentrate them at these 2 locations, they're ready to spawn. We've made sure they have the habitat available. They should right away start spawning and start increasing their population. Every fish that we put into Plum Creek will get a visual tag, which I'll get to soon. And then we're going to perform a fall sampling, which we're actually planning on doing next week, just to check in to see if we're going to collect any of these species that were never there before that we translocated into the stream. So when I talk about a visual tag, it's called a visual implant elastomer. It's essentially a 2-part epoxy mix that you mix up in an insulin syringe. We're going to inject these fish below the scales right into the skin so that it's still visible, as you can see here on the right. It's a pink stripe for 2021. So the benefits of that is we're going to color code them by year. So if we still see a fish in 2025, 2026 with a pink stripe, we can document that that fish has survived in the stream for 4 years, and it's a good sign that they're happy there. We can determine recruitment or successful spawn. Since none of these fish have been collected in Plum Creek before, everyone that we collect without a tag, that's one of the 9 species we put in there, we're going to document that as one of the offspring of the ones that we translocated. And we can also document movement throughout the stream. I mentioned we have 2 seed locations. Each seed location is going to get tagged on a different side of the body. So the upstream site would be tagged on the right side, the left downstream site would be tagged on the left side. So we can determine if these fish are moving throughout the stream or if they're just going right back downstream into the rock or into the Rocky if they're not happy there. So as for progress, all the planning for this really started last winter when Ohio EPA came out with the report. We reached out to some other partner agencies, got a study plan together, and we were able to implement this really quickly. We started our sampling in March because the darters start to spawn in March, late March, April, and we wanted to get them in there before they spawn. Some of our partner agencies would be Ohio State University. Brian Zimmerman was a big help. He's done some of this work prior, not necessarily with normal fish. He does it with threatened fish, trying to expand their range. Students from Ohio University, and then we also had to get approval and support from Ohio EPA Ecological Assessment Section. Those are the guys that proposed the project, the Division of Wildlife, and the Cleveland Metro Parks.
Justin, were there permits that you had to get to relocate the fish? I know that in other situations, we have not been allowed to because of fear of spreading parasites or invasive species into other watersheds.
Yeah, absolutely. We had to get a few permits for this. First, we get a permit every year to do our normal biological work. It's called a scientific collection permit from the Division of Wildlife. That just gives us the ability to collect fish for this purpose. Second would be another permit from the Division of Wildlife, which is a translocation of native non-sport fish. So we sent the Division of Wildlife our study plan. We detailed that we're not going to move any fish with tumors, deformities, lesions, anything that looks like it's bad. We're not going to translocate them because of a fear of spreading parasites or some kind of flesh-eating disease. They all approved that. The Metro Parks gave us permission to use the Rocky River Reservation as a source location, and then Ohio EPA as well, just giving us really support for this project throughout.
Thanks.
So as for progress, we started in March and we went through the middle of May. We were able to meet our target of 200 individuals per species on 6 of the 9 species, which is really good. And in total, we translocated 3,367 fish from the Rocky River into the Plum Creek at the 2 seed locations. The middle bucket here really shows the minnows. These are all typical small river fish. So the largest fish you're going to get is maybe 5 inches long. You can see the visual implant elastomer tag in all of them. And then on the right side, that's our first release into Plum Creek. So just bringing it back to our overall goals of this project, our goal is to bring Plum Creek back into full attainment. Well, not back into full attainment, but achieve full attainment for the first time ever, really. If we're able to do that, we'll eliminate the need for an aquatic life use redesignation at a lower water quality goal. This figure or table on the right here kind of simulates if we're successful with all 9 species, what our score might look like. And we're able to increase the score from 22 up to 46, which exceeds expectations of warm water habitat, which is what that's designated. If we're even able to score a 40 on this IBI metric, we'll be in full attainment for fish community biology for the first time. And the table on the bottom left here, the ICI score, that's your macroinvertebrate score of 34, that's in attainment. And for the first time ever, we'll be in full attainment for your water quality standards on Plum Creek. We'll enhance water quality and we'll drive the protection on Plum Creek because they won't have to redesignate it down to a lower water quality use. So Plum Creek is not the only stream in our service area that has physical barriers. Some are natural, some are not natural. It's this picture here, Blodgett Creek. These fish are small, and a 1.5 to 2 foot leap for a fish that's 3 inches long is a mighty feat for them. So Blodgett Creek is another stream that has the potential to do this. Ohio EPA noted a big change in the fish community upstream and downstream of this barrier during their 2014 assessment. Abram Creek has a couple fish barriers, but it's got some other issues with it. One being it's all wetland upstream, and those really don't support a good fish community biology. Big Creek's got the John and Eggy Cascade, which should allow fish passage. We're going to try to document that. Then some other natural ones would be the Mill Creek and Brandywine Creek Falls. So this is kind of a pilot project. We're going to run this out for 3 years, see how it works. And if we're successful at restoring Plum Creek's biology, we're going to look to expand this and make this part of our regular routine to try to bring other streams, as I showed in the last slide, back into full attainment for their water quality standards. Does anybody have any questions for me, comments about the project?
None that I see.
All right, so I will hand it over to George Remius. He's the manager of Stormwater Strategic Support. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So I have 2 topics I'm going to be covering with you today. The first one is to talk a little bit about how we use monitoring data or various types of data to support our urgent storm event response. The second one is how we have been taking these completed master plan stormwater models and starting to extend them into the local system to help address some of the local issues while looking for regional opportunities. So regarding the first topic, as you've learned through different presentations from the WAC, we've covered, the steps involved with our urgent storm response. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the different types of data. All this information is very useful, something that we use to track both what's coming, what happened, and then where we're going during the course of a storm event. Some of the data that we use is the rainfall data. We have 30 rain gauges throughout the district service area. Our 30th was recently installed at our Westerly treatment plant. And we also have a lot of gauge adjusted radar data. You see this figure on the right shows the coverage area. It's a little over 1,300 square miles. So it covers not only the stormwater service area, but also what drains into it as well to support our analysis. We also have a number of monitors that are either installed by the USGS that we support and fund, our own district monitors, as well as some outside vendor monitors that are also installed. We'll go over that as well. And then lastly, we have a number of different trail cams that we use to collect photos and compile those into videos to help us understand about flooding, debris, and erosion. Next slide. So regarding the district rain gauges, once again, I mentioned there's 30 of them that are installed. We're able to quickly extract that data from those monitors and quickly process that into what are defined as recurrence intervals. And that is for the different durations you see on the left, the peak 5-minute, the peak 10-minute, up to the peak 48-hour duration of what is the peak rainfall amount that occurred. And then comparing that to 2 different references. There's the Huff and Angel series of the rainfall frequency of the Midwest that was done in 1990, and then the NOAA Atlas 14, which was done in 2004, to help give us a good idea of anything from the 2-month recurrence interval or up to the 1,000-year recurrence interval. And we do that for each of the rain gauges for each of these storm events to give us a sense of where do we have high intensity rainfall versus heavy rainfall. High intensity is something I typically define as being at least 1 inch per hour or more, and then heavy rainfall being closer to at least 2 inches of rainfall over a 24-hour period. You can see on the table on the left for the Westlake rain gauge that for the shorter durations, the 5-minute to 1 hour, there are relatively small amounts of rainfall and didn't statistically jump out. Whereas for the longer period of time, particularly the peak 12 and 24-hour, it was closer to a 5-year recurrence interval, which is significant. To the figure on the right, we also show the cumulative total of that rainfall just to also get a better sense of how the system responded. And as you can tell with the Westlake figure or the line graph, it kind of shows you how much rainfall occurred compared to that 5-year, 24-hour total. And you can see when most of it occurred during that storm event. Next slide, please. In addition to the rain gauges, this gauge adjusted radar rainfall, and this is something that the district's been collecting since 2016. We have these 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid data that we collect at 5-minute intervals. And we're able to, similar to the district rain gauge data, compare all of those for equivalent, what were the peak 5-minute to the 48-hour time step, and compare that to recurrence intervals as well to answer the same types of questions. You can see on the figure to the right, this is for the peak 30-minute duration, and the colors that are closer to the yellow and oranges indicate the higher intensity rainfall. And you can see there's an area that's on the left where there's some orange blocks that indicate it was closer to a 10-year type of recurrence interval. And it just so happens to be the same sub-watershed that Justin talked about for Plum Creek. And there is a USGS rain gauge or stream monitor included there. And that's what you see on the figure in the upper left, which indicates that the water elevation has exceeded the action stage and actually met the minor flood stage, which we'll talk about here in a second. That's an indication that there was some high waters, could have been some flooding, and that would have prompted us to do a field response there. Next slide, please. So with the different monitors, we have roughly 80 across the service area between the USGS, our own, and some outside vendors. We are slowly building towards getting all 80 of those to define what I think is a very useful approach that the National Weather Service uses, which is defining flood stages. And there's 4 of them shown on the bottom left. There's the action stage, the minor flooding, moderate flooding, and major flooding stages. Action stage would be an indication that the monitor has recorded a level that shows the water is about to get out of its banks and start accessing the floodplain. Minor flooding would indicate that there was some type of road flooding, a local road flooding. Moderate flooding would indicate, in addition to road flooding, there could be some homes that are now starting to be inundated. And then major flooding is a large collection of roads and homes being flooded. The table on the right is something that we also compile and take a look at each of those 80 monitors to get a sense of where are they compared to those National Weather Service flood stages. And you can see the example here on the right where the Plum Creek monitor and the West Branch Rocky River monitor had both currently had exceeded their action stage, and at its peak was above that action stage as well. These would be indications where we would send some crews out to go check on the potential flooding that occurred. Next slide, please. And then trail cams, we have roughly 20 trail cams scattered across the service area. And a lot of these are located in remote areas or places that are either debris prone, flood prone, or areas that we're tracking from an erosion perspective. The figure on the left kind of gives you an idea of during the July 12th storm. This is the airport debris rack over Cleveland Hopkins. You can see that the water was overtopping the debris rack, and you can also see some of the debris that was piling up behind it. This would be an indication that we would send off a maintenance crew to go clean that debris off the debris rack. Picture on the right is our Lakeview Dam. And you can see, once again, this was a September 23rd event. You can, based on the debris lines, you can see generally how high the water got. And also this is a indication that we need to send some maintenance crews that clean that debris as well. We can also compile these trail cam photos into videos, which also helps tell the picture of how the water rises and falls during the course of that storm event. Next slide. So with all of those, along with any of the field end observations, so the rain gauge data, GAR rainfall data, monitoring data, we also look for the sediment and debris accumulation, any additional field observations, and then customer and media reports of flooding. So just to reemphasize that report of flood tool, the more we can have that populated with any reported flooding problems, that really helps us with either fine tuning our models or just making sure we understand the type of storm that we received. And with that data, then we do conduct different types of analysis. I talked a little bit about that rainfall statistics. Where did we have heavy rain? Where did we have high intensity? because that indicates places that we'd go out in the field for those different types of events. And then we also like to compare our model predicted flooding to the actual flooding to see if there's a good correlation, and if not, something that we might need to revisit. Then finally, we like to compare the different historical storms just to better understand potential correlations of rainfall to flooding and then rainfall to debris accumulation. Next slide. So the second topic I wanted to cover is how we're starting to take those master planning models that we developed and starting to expand and extend them into the local system to help better understand the system response and looking for opportunities for resolving flooding, not only in the local system, but how that can benefit the regional as well. And there are times when the district is contacted by a community to help with a local project. And when I get involved, we look and see where we might need to extend the model and then provide some additional detail. And I've got an example to share with you today. So the example is for the city of Brook Park. They had contacted the city or contacted the district and asked if we can help both assess a couple of ideas they had for installing some local detention, but also realized that there was other flooding that was occurring in this location and asked if we can provide assistance, in which we agreed to do. So just a little background for this area with the Kalita Ditch. City of Brook Park itself, heavily developed in the 50s and 60s during the post-World War II era. The drainage area itself is about 4 square miles, and a little more than half of that is impervious area. And since it was built primarily in the 50s and 60s, very few of the stormwater management requirements of today existed. And as a result, very few stormwater control measures exist today because of that. Many of the streams have been culverted as well. And in this particular location, many of the storm sewers are in what we call common trench sewers, where both the sanitary line and the storm line are within the same trench. And many of those, when you compare them to today's standards, are a little more undersized and getting closer to the end of their useful life. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of just how quickly this area developed during that period of time, you can see the picture on the left indicates the current the development back in 1951. You can see just looking at this area, just how little of it was truly developed prior to that time. The picture on the right shows less than 3 decades later, it was almost fully built out. Lots of new neighborhoods, lots of new businesses, and as a result, all the stormwater infrastructure to support that was installed as well. Next slide. So the challenge then, as I kind of hinted at before, is just the type of stormwater requirements that were required at that time. And this figure here kind of gives you a snapshot of, it's not just in this particular city, it's for most part all of Ohio. So this figure on the top shows you what the population of Ohio was over the decades and compares that to the stormwater management requirements at that time. You can see prior to 1980, there was very few stormwater management requirements. The sizing of the storm sewer pipes were rather smaller compared to today. Very few, if any, floodplain regulations, and very few, if any, stormwater control measures. Compared to today, now you would have to provide a bigger pipe to prevent storm sewer surcharging or street flooding. There's the FEMA introduction of the floodplain, stream setback requirements, stormwater control measures, both for flood control and water quality volume, that are now required for all storms or for all new development. You can see the population compared to 1980 is very small. So there's so much of our infrastructure here across the state and many of the cities in our service area. This is just a common challenge that we have to deal with. And so I think this example here is a very good example of what we're trying to look at across the service area. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the other challenges here, outside of everything that we talked about, was the types of soils and the topography. It's very poor drainage soils, more silty clay, and it's a very flat sloped area as well. The slope itself is closer to a 0.2% slope, 0.12% some areas. So it's a very flat area. So once the water gets there, it takes a long time to draw down. So based upon that, and compared to what our master plan model focus was, we decided to do a lot of expansion to better understand the local system, how the regional system may influence the local system, but equally important, how we can develop solutions in the local system that might benefit the regional system. So the table on the right gives you an idea of the level of detail that the master plan model was originally at versus where it's been extended to date. And the model catchments, there was roughly 76, and that average catchment size of 33 is a very good size. But as you can see to the right, we wanted to understand at both the catch basin level, just how the system was responding, as well as at the parcel level for the non-residential areas, the commercial and industrial potential solutions that we can develop as part of this project. From a modeling perspective, on the conduit size, we had a little over 53,000 lineal feet in the original model, and we extended that to nearly 250,000 feet. And so the next couple slides will just give you an example of what that comparison looks like as well. Figure on the left shows you the master plan catchment delineations. Once again, there are 76 at an average of 33 acres. And you can see the level of detail that was added to support that catch basin hydrologic loading, as well as the parcel level non-commercial areas or non-residential areas as well. Next slide. Figure on the left shows the hydraulic model extents, and most of that was primarily the regional system. And the figure on the right gives you an example of how we extended that further into the local system, not only to understand some of the original projects the city had proposed, but also some ideas of additional projects as well. And I'd like to just emphasize how cooperative the city was with providing drawings, very open to different types of solutions, and something that we're working together on. Next slide, please. So I think where the bulk of the projects or potential solutions will be are really focused more on the storage, as I mentioned before, because so little of it was required back in the day. So there's three types of storage solutions that we're generally looking at. There's the inline basin that you'd normally think about. But in order for that really to be successful, you need to think about the elevation difference to allow the ponding without impacting the local system, which, as I mentioned, is a very flat area here, so it's very limited. There's also some conventional offline storage that's being looked at as well, but with the challenge of that, you also have to have enough area to divert the new storage into, and with this fully developed area that's very culverted, once again, another challenge. And then finally, the more decentralized approach with some potential underground storage and bioswales, where it looks like there is great application, but also both technically challenging as well as financially challenging. But with an area like this, this looks like it might actually have the biggest potential in an area that we're currently exploring. So in the current spot where we're at with the model is we've got 3 different monitors in the ground, recording different stages, and we're getting some field response during the bigger storms, and we're near calibration or completing the model calibration, and then we'll be getting into the problem definition and alternative development. Next slide. So with that, I'll answer any questions that there may be.
I do not see any questions right now, George.
Okay. With that, then I will hand it off to Rachel Webb, one of our project managers, to give an update on the Cuyahoga River South Stormwater Master Plan.
Afternoon, everyone. I hope you're doing well. So the slide you see now is probably one you've seen me present multiple times. Nothing's changed here, but just to kind of highlight, what we did with the Stormwater Master Plan. We had the 80 problem areas, a good chunk of change estimated for those problem areas on just under 200 million. And then the community reports were distributed way back in 2019, seems like a decade ago. With that being said, it's not a plan that we have, put on the shelf and walked away from. If you move to the next slide, we actively use that plan to funnel the projects into stormwater construction planning, where those projects are scored and ranked. With the projects that were outlined in the master plan, here's just a snapshot of a couple that we have active in this Watershed Advisory Committee area. So a couple of Chippewa Creek projects there, one looking to start construction here next year. Excuse me, one that is in the process of acquiring easements and soon to resume design. They paused to do that easement acquisition before they finalize design. And then you have Brandywine Creek down in Hudson. And this is a project that is being led by Hudson. And that is looking for construction in 2022. And Bear Creek up in North Randall, which is looking at construction in 2022. So just wanted to keep it to the forefront, right? We do use these master plans and are continuously moving projects into design from them or to activate. So next slide, please. With that being said, we do have problem areas that were identified from the master plans that are complex, or their cost estimate is above a single project that could be completed. So upwards of 12, 15, 20, 30 million dollars, right? Which is not something that can be done in one shot. Or we require some additional information to understand the full impacts on the regional system. So we've been doing some advanced planning. We are going to be opening up a second contract with that here this fall. The current, what we've been doing, an example of what we've been doing under the current contract, if you move to the next slide. This is a problem area in Broadview Heights and Chippewa Creek. Wallings Road is that northern main road that runs across the image there from west to east. A question came up with regards to a detention basin and the influence of that detention basin on the regional system, and some street flooding that wasn't captured in the master plan. And by not captured, I mean, it wasn't showing up as flooding, and we had reports of flooding from property owners in the area. And this area we were looking, and those questions are in the northern part of that map, the turnaround there, Majestic Oaks, and what is outside of the red box is that detention basin. And so some folks wanted to know, does this detention basin, can it be modified to help with the regional system? And then would that be something we would be interested in taking on? So to answer some of those questions, we needed to look and do some additional analysis. So we wanted to look at the model. So if you go to the next slide, we did some work through this advanced planning process, and we built out the model a little bit more. George's information there on the local that he did is similar to exactly what we did with this advanced planning. We added some additional information and detail into the model to be able to better capture what's happening in this area. And we did see the expansion of some of those flooding areas. What it did result in, though, is that some of that flooding that wasn't captured in our model, though, is a result of some of the local infrastructure, not necessarily the regional stream that is causing that issue. So there's a lot more conversations to be had. We also, kind of highlighted that basin, modified or not, does not have as much influence on the regional system or that potential benefit to the regional system. So able to answer some of these additional questions that come up on advanced planning. And this is just one example of that. So next slide. And I am short and sweet today, so I don't have a lot. We're just continuing to move along and with the advanced planning. So if there are any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm gonna go with there are no questions because I addressed everything. And I'm gonna pass it along to Kelsey Amadon from our Stormwater Inspection and Maintenance Group.
Thanks, Rachel. So I'm just going to talk about our swim group. We're going to talk about some of our inspections and maintenances that we have performed so far this year, and then also talk about the demolition services that we've started. To start with inspections, this is just a quick photo of a bank in Big Creek. It's about 11 feet high. It looks a lot smaller in this photo. And it was about 27 feet from a house. And so we recently removed the home and acquired that parcel so that we could get rid of the erosion risk to that BTU. So as an overall, we've completed 257 total inspections in the Cuyahoga River South watershed this year. 167 of those were swim inspections, and 90 of those are our other responsible party inspections. So those include other agencies like the county or the Metro Parks or ODOT or the railroad. To highlight a couple of inspections that we came across. So first we have, as you can see on the screen, this is in Chippewa Creek in Broadview Heights. So we went out for an inspection and noticed that this stream had been rapidly eroding and had exposed a manhole, and there's a couple other utilities nearby. So there's a concrete encased sanitary sewer. There's another 8-inch sanitary sewer, as well as those exposed manholes. So considering some project things to that would include both that upstream sanitary, the exposed manhole, and the 8-inch sanitary. So this is an area that we will continue to monitor and inform the responsible parties as we figure out what how to make sure that the stream and these utilities are protected. Up next, this is a culverted stream in Plum Creek. So this is adjacent to Derbyshire Drive. It's in a side yard kind of between two homes. So this is just upstream of a debris rack that we regularly have maintenance at. It is a corrugated metal pipe, and it has large rips in the invert as well as a large deflection at the crown. And there is a portion on the top that all the soil has been washed away from, and there is a 4-inch separation between the joints. So this culvert is actually, the design is complete, and it is slated to be replaced with a concrete culvert, I believe, in 2022. Moving on to our maintenance. This is just a quick photo of a culvert in Mayfield. This is a CMP culvert again, and the invert is ripped up, and so debris has just been accumulating on that ripped CMP. So we went in and removed that debris to restore conveyance. There we go. A summary of our maintenance work so far this year in the Cuyahoga River South. So we've completed 15 total maintenance projects. 14 of those included 653 cubic yards of debris and 72 cubic yards of sediment that we've removed. The other project that's listed, that would include things like demolition, small scales, or tree removals. This one project is attributed to a demolition, which I'm going to talk about in a couple of slides. To highlight some maintenance project that we have, this is also along Chippewa Creek in kind of off of Broadview Road. So this is a hotspot for us. We're out there pretty frequently. So it's a hotspot for woody debris and for structural issues. So we are out there frequently for inspections for this double-barreled culvert. And it also frequently clogs up with debris. So we go and maintain that, especially after rain events. And up last, we're going to talk about our demolition services update. So a critical part of the regional stormwater management program is property acquisition. And that's because we need some parcels for implementing other projects, as well as removing some of the risks to homes. So most of the properties that we acquired do have existing structures, and so those have to be demolished. Originally, the Cleveland Land Bank was taking care of the demolition for us, but in 2020, SWIM took over this program, and that includes the asbestos survey and abatement, as well as the demolition service of all of the structures that are on site. So the asbestos survey and demo contracts were awarded and they began this spring, and the projects are being prioritized based on how long the property has been vacant, as well as the project timelines that the parcel may be included in. This is a photo of the home on Forest Overlook in Seven Hills. This home was in a close proximity to an eroding stream bank and is part of a planned project. So we removed the house, the driveway, the foundation, any sheds that might have been on the parcel, and then graded and reseeded the site until it's time for the larger project. So far, we've removed 4 homes and there are 3 in the process. And I think with that, I will take any questions if there's any in the chat.
Thanks, Kelsey. I do not see any.
Awesome. So then I will hand it over to Kim Kolich, our manager of stormwater design.
All right, thank you, Kelsey, and thanks everyone for being here today. I'm going to go through a few highlights from our design projects and construction projects that have recently completed.
Kim,
Hey,
your
Kim.
volume is very low.
Okay.
Try it again.
How's the volume now? Is it still too low? Just a second, let me try something. Is that better? Can you hear me better now?
That's a little bit better. Yeah.
I'm turning up the volume on the mic.
There you go. There you
Okay.
go. That's better.
We've never had to adjust that volume before. All right. All right, so we're going to start with a project that we've talked about a couple times already here this afternoon, and that's the Bear Creek Culvert Improvements Project in the village of North Randall. Rachel mentioned this as being a problem area within the Kyogre River South Stormwater Master Plan, and then Kelsey mentioned it during their inspections of some of these culverts. So this project has been under design for a little while. I think we talked about it either at the last WAC meeting or the WAC meeting before that. But the goals of this project are to reduce flooding and erosion risks within this neighborhood, which is a tributary to Bear Creek, this stream asset, to replace or daylight the structurally deficient regional stormwater assets that are within this problem area. The consultant for this project is GPD. Estimated construction cost is just over $1 million, and we are really wrapping everything up right now. We have our permit from Army Corps. We are just finalizing some of these easements within the neighborhood. As noted on the slide, we had 11 parcels where we had easements, so it took a little longer than we had expected to get all those easements put together, but we do believe we have them, and we're going to be moving forward on this project, and we're really excited to get this one going and replace those culverts that may keep some of us up at night after a rain event, because you never know when they're going to completely fail. So the next project, this one in the city of Brecksville, is the flood reduction project at Riverview Road. And this is a project that I know Rachel put up a short list of projects within the Kyogre River South master plan area that we're implementing right now. And this one that is also one that is just getting started. Really what we're looking for on this project is to reduce the surface flooding risks at Riverview Road, which is, if you look at the map on the upper right side of that image for the map, to reduce the upstream erosion and sedimentation from happening and then being carried downstream, to minimize the long-term maintenance requirements. EMH&T is currently working on this project. We don't have a construction cost yet, although the master plan had some estimates on a high level. Because this is a pre-design only task for EMH&T, we're working through finalizing that now. They'll be looking at how to phase this project, right? So this is one of those larger problem areas that Rachel talked about, the $10, $12, $13 million areas that we want to break down into more manageable phases. And so we're hoping once the pre-design is complete, we can really find out what phase we want to start on, what gives us the biggest benefit from this area, potentially look at what is less complex in implementation. Sometimes that's based upon property interests, and start with that phase 1 design next year, and then hopefully have a phase 1 construction in 2024, because this is an area that, excuse me, along Riverview Road floods very frequently because of the sediment that's coming down from these steep ravines within the Cuyahoga Valley. So this is we're really excited to analyze this area a little bit more, and then finally implement some solutions to the systemic flooding that's happening. Next project I want to talk about is over in the city of Pepper Pike. So this is a culvert replacement and rehabilitation along Gates Mills Boulevard along the Pepperloose Creek stream system. The goals here are a couple things. One, to replace failing culverts within the project area. And while we're out there, enlarging a detention basin that currently exists within the boulevard at Gates Mills, on Gates Mills Boulevard, to make that larger, to reduce the flows that are occurring downstream. Jacobs is working on this project on the design side. Estimated construction cost is just over $2 million. We're hoping to have a construction NTP in the spring of next year. And one item to note on this project was that the city of Pepper Pike is utilizing some of their community cost share money for a rehab of a culvert on the upstream end of this project that's located within the existing Gates Mills Boulevard right away. So we're always looking for those opportunities to work with the communities and making the project a more holistic solution. Next up, I wanted to touch on culverted stream rehab. You know, a lot of our projects thus far that we've implemented under design and construction have been focused on erosion issues and stream restoration. Partly because we were waiting for the master plans to really determine what problem areas we wanted to focus on from a flooding perspective, and also waiting on some of those preliminary assessments of these culverted streams that were done under the master plan. Because we did inspect all of our regional culverted streams within our service area under the master plan projects, which was a great benefit to have that data. So this one is kind of a first package of culverted stream rehab that we'll be implementing. This one is in the Mill Creek Watershed in the city of Garfield Heights. Again, rehabbing several culverts that are identified on this map. Brown and Caldwell is leading that design effort. Estimated construction 1.5, and we did just receive the next round of submittal on that. It looks like we're going to be higher than that number. As culverted streams go, they tend to get worse over time and not better. So costs are definitely inching up on this one. But we'll be looking at how to implement those projects within our cash flow and our budget, and really start looking forward to getting some of these culverted streams replaced. The one interesting item to note on this project is there's one asset, one culverted stream, which is shown in green near the southern edge of that map, MC58, that we're looking at potentially daylighting the culvert in part of that location as an alternative instead of rehabbing or lining the existing culvert. And so Brown and Caldwell is going through that exercise and figuring out if it's feasible and potentially how much property interest we may need in order to implement a daylighting of a culverted stream within that area. And then just generally, as I said, that's kind of our first culverted stream rehab that we're doing out of this program now that the master plans are complete. This will be a continuous procedure that we'll be doing with our culverted streams. We have been budgeting $1.5 million annually for rehab. That number can certainly change as we find priorities throughout our service area, and as some of these culverted streams continue to deteriorate and become a higher priority. So we're going to continue to look at which culverts we should be targeting for rehab, replacement, or removal, right, to daylight them. And also, I would just like to note that we are tracking these culverts through our stormwater inspection and maintenance group. I know Kelsey has been working on these culverted streams pretty extensively. And we have a prioritization list, right? So the worst get ranked number one, right? And so on. So as we re-inspect these culverts, that prioritization list can shift a little bit. And it just allows us to continue to focus on the priorities and the culverts that concern us the most within our service area and try to get to those as soon as we can. And I think that comes to the end of the design slides, and we're going to go in a couple of construction slides now. So just a couple of construction projects to note that have completed this year. The first is the Rocky River Trib project along Ridge Road, and this is in the city of North Royalton. I think the before and after photos on this project really say a lot. And hopefully you can really see that before picture, because what had happened was that this tributary was diverted to adjacent to Ridge Road, right? And over time, those erosive forces began eating away into that embankment of Ridge Road. And so when we looked at this project, we said, well, you could do two things. You could put up a new wall and reinforce that embankment of Ridge Road again, or you can move the stream away. So in moving the stream away from Ridge Road, we do a few things. We increase, water quality, of this tributary. We created more floodplain for not only this trib, but just downstream is where the Rocky River branches, so that it also allows it to back up into this floodplain and just slow down some of those erosive forces. So there's one thing. And then the second thing to note is that, doing a solution like this really does look at the long-term maintenance costs, because over time, if you decided to do a hard infrastructure fix against Ridge Road, you'd be back, right? It would be a continuous maintenance item. So doing a solution like this really allows you to do the project and really just walk away. So we're really excited about this one. And then the second one is a similar stabilization restoration project. This one in Pepper Pike on Pepperloose Creek near Lander Road. Very similar issues, although we didn't have a roadway that we were paralleling with this stream segment. This one, we were actually able to purchase a home and be able to expand that floodplain of Pepperloose Creek, expand the channel width, and allow the stream to do what it wants to do naturally, is just to kind of widen out and access that floodplain. So that project as well is just completing. And I do believe that there was actually a final walkthrough on this project this afternoon. So we're excited to see a couple of these projects really, really pop with the growth and really pop with restoring the stream to where it should be. Okay. I think that concludes my section. And at this point, I think I'll turn it back over to Donna.
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate that. Thank you to all of our speakers today. I just have a few closing remarks. So we wanted to congratulate Frank Greenland on his Lifetime Achievement Award that he received from the district. He has 33 years of service right now, and we're very happy to have him as our leader. And then also a big thank you to Mark Link, Manager of Stormwater Inspection and Maintenance, who will be retiring at the end of the year. Thank you for all of the work that you've done, and especially for the stormwater program work that you've done and you've worked on since 2010. So with that, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. This concludes our meeting today, and thank you for your time.